host here, Mrs. Marceline Edwards. She is also here. Before we get on to Dr. Honychurch, let me just say hi and hello to Mrs. Edwards. Good afternoon to you.
Yes, thank you, Lofty. A pleasant good afternoon to you too, Lofty. And of course, a pleasant good afternoon to you, Dr. Lennox Honychurch. It is quite refreshing having you as a guest on this segment of the Civic Vibes on this wonderful Sunday as it relates to the history and celebrations of our carnival. I welcome you, sir, to our Facebook Live platform, which is the official outlet of the Civic Vibes. I would like to also say a special good afternoon to my diaspora neighbors, friends, and family who have connected near and far in both the cold and warm climates, as well as my lovely and resilient Dominican people in every corner of my beautiful carnival-spirited homeland, Dominica, connected to this Civic Vibes Live. You are the pulse of this program with your usual style of participation and support. So I bring you warm greetings from my home state, New Jersey, and the New York tri-states area. I am your co-host, Marceline Edwards, and it's always a pleasure to be with you here. So welcome, please participate and share the live. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you very much, Marceline. Talking about participate, the live is already buzzing. So a special good afternoon to everyone already glued, already hooked to the Civic Vibes Facebook platform live here this afternoon. Let us now go to the man of the hour, as it were, Dr. Lennox Honychurch. Good afternoon to you, sir.
Good afternoon, Lofty, and great to be with you on this new departure. I have not been on this program before, and also to be able to meet virtually Marceline Edwards, to be here together. So it's a great afternoon. And of course, Carnival Sunday afternoon, in other times, we may be doing other things. So it's interesting that we should be gathered here together to discuss Carnival over the ages. From what I understand, my contribution will be to lead on from the early days through the development and the changes, the songs, the costumes, and the patterns of behavior over those periods of time, which spans well over 200 years. So thanks for inviting me, and I look forward to participating in this program.
Thank you, Doctor. Again, it's our privilege to welcome you here. And on behalf of the many persons already locked into the page, on their behalf, Marceline and I want to say a special good afternoon. We also have as well, as part of our team, another co-host of the program, but she's not here, unfortunately, with us this afternoon. That is Miss Paula Celestin. Paula Celestin, wherever you are, whatever you're doing at this time, I know that you're glued to the Civic Vibes program. Pleasant good afternoon to you as well, and pleasant viewing. Let us get into the meat of things. But before we get into the meat of things, Dr. Honychurch, we have a number of persons listening and watching. For the persons who may not know Dr. Lennox Honychurch, can you just give a brief, introduction of yourself, sir? Just in case.
Okay, no, that's fine, that's fine. I was born in Portsmouth, Dominica, back in 1952, December 27th, 1952. And I lived most of my life up in the north, in the areas of Calabishi, where my grandmother was, and then of course Girardel, because my father had a place there, and so scattered around Dominica in various parts. And I went to school partly in Dominica, partly in Barbados, and of course over that period of time I participated in a wide variety of cultural activities, particularly carnival. I was a carnival costume builder and organizer of bands back in the 1970s. I think I built my first costume for Carnival 1969. And then over that period of time, I contributed and participated in all sorts of cultural activities, of course, Independence time as well, with helping to organize shows and painting stages and all those aspects. But basically, I would say I've been at it for about 50 years, from the time I left school in 1971, and particularly through the 70s and the 80s. So that's my background. I educated in Dominica and Barbados, but also in Britain, United Kingdom, did anthropology at Oxford University. And then I returned to Dominica, wrote a few books, research. I taught for a while, both at beginning of St. Mary's Academy briefly, but also at the very start of the community high school when they needed teachers. The community high school and also the Northeast Comprehensive, but in the days when it was St. Andrew's High School, after Hurricane David, when there was a desperation because of lack of housing in Roseau to open a new school. So I was in the beginning of that as well. And all of that has given me a great kind of background and awareness. Both of my grandparents were members of the Legislative Council. Both of them represented what was then the Northeast constituency that went all the way from Penville to Montjean, that whole parish of St. Andrew and St. David in those days. So I was really tutored and aware of all of that. And that's what got me involved and interested in history and culture and heritage, because as I grew up, I was very much part of those changes that were taking place in Dominica at the time. So that's a kind of sketch background, give you an idea.
Yes, yes, indeed, indeed. So in a nutshell, like we can say here on Civic Vibes that you're a true Dominican man.
Well, yes, I consider myself as. I'm not anywhere. I don't have passport for any other place. That's me, you know.
All right.
And that's what I am. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you, Doc, for your introductory statements here. Very, very, very full indeed. As I said a while ago, you're a true Dominican man, and you are. I was listening to a program earlier with my brother Alex Bruno, and he basically gave you, that is Alex Bruno, a lot of kudos. He is referencing a lot of your books that you wrote when he is doing whatever he's doing in terms of his education piece to Dominicans by and large. And he referred to you as an authority on the historical things in Dominica, and I tend to agree with him.
Yeah, but I also always tell people, you know, you give me all these high praise and all that, but you have to understand that there are many other people that are involved in this kind of thing. You know, we've just had Thomas Fontaine bring out a book about the Maroons of Dominica. Irvin, right, there you have it. You have a copy right there. Yes. So I did one. He's done one. Other papers by the late Para Rivera on the Maroons. I would say that Para Rivera, in terms of distinction, is a far more advanced historian than I. He taught at the University of the West Indies, was involved in key aspects of Caribbean life in the 70s. And then there's a historian that we don't know anything about in Dominica, and yet he's a Dominican-born historian. He's no longer with us, but his name is Joseph Borromée, and he was a teacher at Columbia University in New York. And he wrote some immensely important papers on Dominica, although he didn't live in Dominica for most of his life, you know. But I think the reason that people maybe hear of me more, and this is one thing I forgot to mention in the introduction, is that for many years I worked in the early days with what was Radio Dominica, DBS. And so I did programs on DBS, commentaries for shows, all of this kind of stuff. So I suppose that's how I got into the public domain. And then, of course, for a few years, for one term, I was a senator in the Dominica House of Assembly. So all of these things pieced together gave me the experience to be able to learn about various aspects of Dominican development and change. So that's another thing that I want to add, particularly the radio and television work.
Yes, indeed, indeed. Thank you very much again for those information. A lot of Dominicans, I myself don't know some of what you said, so it is very interesting to learn something new about you, Doc. But let us get into the real reason why we are here this afternoon. We're here to talk about the seasons and time that we are in now, our carnival celebration, our carnival spirit. Let us just start it off by asking you, Mr. Honychurch, can you give the listening public an idea of, or describe when one heard it with carnival, how, just give a brief description as to what comes to mind or what should come to mind.
Well, one of the first things we have to understand, it is a merging of two cultural influences. The first and most important cultural influence is the African influence, because in West Africa, prior to any enslaved people leaving that area of West Africa, Central Africa, and the interior of West Africa, there were many festivals that were observed by the different groups all along from what is today's Senegal, going down to Angola. And of course, there were ceremonies related mainly to farming. You know, you had the yam season, for instance, so you'd have festivals related to yam and farming. You would have millet. You'd have the actual district festivals. All of this was taking place. We're going back to the 15th, 16th century, long before the whole business of transatlantic slavery began. And then what happened with transatlantic slavery, you had all these different groups, these tribal groups, being put on ships, brought to various islands. And so there was a whole mix-up taking place. So in many cases, they lost their original festival purpose or background. But what they did is they merged it together and linked it to the festivals that they found when they were brought to the Caribbean. Now, let us understand that certain of these Caribbean islands belonged to and were controlled by France. Another set were controlled by Britain, by England. And therefore, we will find that the English territories, the more English places like St. Kitts, Antigua, Barbados, they had their main festivals between Christmas and New Year. Now, many of those places changed their festivals and moved them to the summer. So that's what happened in Barbados. They have crop over now. And then, of course, in Antigua, it was moved from the Christmas time and made a big carnival in the center of summer. The only place really that has kept that traditional festival is St. Kitts Nevis, where they have their carnival between Christmas and New Year's. So what happened with the enslaved people is they transported in their minds, their memories of their various festivals which they had enjoyed and participated in Africa. And some of the costumes, they remembered how they were put together, and they brought those in their minds and established them in the islands. Now, in the French Roman Catholic islands, of which Dominica was one, the big festival was in the 2 days before Lent, the 2 days before Ash Wednesday. That went way back into French history. So that was when those islands that were controlled by France had their free time and their celebration. And that is why we end up today with Carnival being in those 2 days before Lent. That is Carnevale, if you look at the word, and you look at it in both Latin and to a certain extent Italian. Carne is flesh, vale is goodbye. So carnevale, carnival, is farewell to flesh. Now we're talking about all kind of flesh. We're talking about sexy flesh, and we're talking about also eating meat and that kind of thing. So what happened is you would have those 2 days, the Monday and the Tuesday before Ash Wednesday, when you would celebrate, you would eat, you would drink, you would dance to music before midnight. And the next morning, Ash Wednesday, you had your 40 days of Lent. So that is how you got Carnival, from that, those words put together, farewell to flesh. But then in the French territories, because also in France they used it as a festival, so they had masquerade. So people would dress up in costumes, they would masquerade, they'd cover their faces with masks, and they would go up and down the streets and so. And even in the time of slavery in Dominica, you would have that period on the French plantations visiting one plantation after the other, but you would get what they called a papier liberté. That is a paper letting you be free. You can move around or go where you want, but you would have to have your papier liberté, because if you were stopped and you didn't have it from your plantation owner, and so you could get into big trouble and be punished. So prior to the abolition of slavery, you would gather on the plantations, and if you wanted to move and groove all over elsewhere, you would have your papier liberté. And that is why today we are one of the last outside of the French Caribbean to have our masquerade, our carnival, on those 2 days before Lent that move up and down depending on when the festival, when the feast is. Now, St. Lucia had it. They had their carnival as we do, but then for tourism purposes, they decided to move it to May at first. That didn't work, so they now have it in July. Trinidad has kept their carnival in the traditional time. Trinidad was Spanish-French territory, so they had their 2 days before Lent. And also, of course, Martinique and Guadeloupe and Haiti as French territories. And that's when it was. So we kept it. We still have it at that time. And so that is why we're celebrating it, for instance, this particular week and in the next couple of days. Now, the term that was used among the French and is still used, for instance, in New Orleans in the United States, which was for a long time a French territory, is Mardi Gras. Mardi, lundi, mardi, Tuesday, okay? Tuesday is Mardi Gras, Fat Tuesday. That's when you can eat up and eat meat and get fat, Mardi Gras. And of course, in Dominica, you also had dances and music on the weekend. So you would have Samedi Gras, Samedi Gras, Dimanche Gras. Samedi Gras, usually in Dominica, in those early days, there would be some big dances on the night of the Saturday before Carnival. And then also the festival would flow into Sunday, but mainly Monday and Tuesday when people came out on the streets. And the thing is that when emancipation came, first in 1834, but more so in 1838, and everybody was free, they did not need their papier liberté, anything again, they would come out on the streets of the main communities. And we're talking about the main villages at the time being along the West Coast, places like Collyho and St. Joseph, and the towns of Portsmouth, and also, of course, Roseau. Point Michel was a big place that had happened, and of course, Grand Bay. And then all those on the East Coast, like La Plaine and Castle Bruce and so. And particularly the Kalinago area, which was then called the Carib Quarter. They would have their own special thing, because you remember the Kalinagos had their festivals as indigenous people long before the Europeans and the Africans came to Dominica. So they had their special festivals. So that's how we get into the beginning. That's how we get here at this particular date of time. It can be, sometimes it moves us into early March. Sometimes it moves back down into mid-February. And so that is how it varies. So now I want to talk a bit about the music. Well, the music obviously is coming from Africa. So you have all of the drums and the percussion that was used within the musical instruments. The goat, particularly the lapo cabuit, the skin of the goat that was stretched over the carved hollow in Africa and parts of the Caribbean, but certainly in Africa, it was done when you carved out the trunk of a tree, part of the trunk of a tree, and you tightened the goat skin over it. And you had certain methods of ensuring that you got the tightest possible grip. And then, of course, you had your boom boom, your various instruments that are more often used now at Independence Time for those kinds of events. And then from the French, you got your accordion. And there was another type of drum that is a flat drum, more like a large tambourine, that they called a tambour basque. Tambour basque. So that was part of it. And if you look in the very old pictures, you'll see lapuka with tambour basque and sometimes trumpets and triangles and pieces of metal on which you would beat the rhythm. So you have your musical instruments there. And then we move to the song. Now the song was extremely important because in Africa, up to today, you still have what they call the call and response. So you have, in our Creole way of speaking, we have the chantuelle. The chantuelle would send the call, and the chorus of the mass of the people would send a response. And so that is how, in conjunction with the music, drumming and whatever, you would have your chanté mass. This was before the days of Calypso. Calypso was moving into a 1950s kind of thing. But the chanté mass was the way in which the mass of the people would put together scandals, events, things that had happened during the year. Mm-hmm. And the best records we have of the chanté mass that still survive are those that originated in the 1920s. Of course, you see, the problem is that we have prior to the 1950s, you had no way of recording these things. So they had to be carried on from generation to generation. So let's look at two of the chanté mass that come from the 1920s. 1922, there's this magistrate, and his name is Solomon, Magistrate Solomon. And he goes with a friend in 9 o'clock at night on a Wednesday night. What are you doing going to Point Michel on a Wednesday night? Your magistrate, who are you going to look for in Point Michel on a Wednesday night? Something's going on there. And on the way back, they have an accident. And the boulders come down, and Solomon and his little car, very few cars in those days, but he was a magistrate, so he had a car. And the car went over the cliff right there by where Point Michel people, Louvière people know as Solomon. It is still called Solomon today. So Solomon dies in this accident, which is very mysterious, a few weeks before Carnival 1922. And when Bonnet, Jouvet, 1922 comes, the people of Point Michel come to Roseau singing, Solomon Oule, Sinu Monu Mona de Sala. Basically saying, yes, Solomon Oule, the stones, the cliff, roll, roll. Because Sinu Monu Mona de Sala, we don't care. Carnival time, Nuka Oule. And we will die. It don't matter, right? So Solomon Oule, Sinu Monu Mona de Sala. Nane Sala se denye nanenu. That is, this year will be our last year. Nupa mele. And they therefore would sing of Solomon, and that has lasted, that has survived. Some of the other chanté mass did not survive that way. The other one in the 1920s that survived just by word of mouth, just by being passed on generation after generation, is the famous one, Adieu William O. Now, William Layton was the chief of police. He's the white English chief of police. And he says, Carnival has to stop at 6 p.m. Well, as people say, who's telling him say that? Because they were expecting Carnival to go on way into the night, and then maybe about 10 o'clock. And so when the bells were ringing in the cathedral, they would go home. But he decides Carnival going to stop at 6 p.m. And he amasses his police force and defense force, because they were volunteer defense force. He were voluntary. He pulled them out and he put them at the top of Constitution Hill. That exists today, Constitution Hill. It used to be called Montfadel. That is Independence Street, right next to St. Martin's School. Bishop's house on one side, St. Martin's School on the other. And he positions himself at the top of this hill to come down at 6 o'clock in what is Independence Street, which in those days was called Granby Street. It was later called Queen Mary Street, coming down to stop all the bands, including mainly the band Mauvais. Now the documents, because it became a court case, so the documents are there. We know Not only people telling you what happened. I remember talking to an old lady, long dead, and she was there and she explained everything to me. But what is more important, I have the document of the court. And so he's there with the police force, that is William Layton. And there is a whole group of Van Move coming across the bridge from Pottersville. They had decided to amass in Pottersville and come towards him. There he is on the top of the hill. And as they move into Roseau Central, along what is today Independence Street, through the area they used to call Lago, they start off. Adieu, William, oh, se mute nuka mute pulamo. So they're saying, goodbye, William, goodbye. Because when we're coming up, we're coming up for death. All right? Adieu, William, oh, se mute nuka mute pulamo. Mute nuka mute pulamo, desan pulavi. Adieu, William, oh, se mute nuka mute pulamo. Now, there you get the call and response of Africa, both in Solomon Ule and in Adieu, William, oh, because in Solomon Ule, it's Solomon Ule, that's one person singing that. Solomon Ule. And then the whole chorus would say, Sinu monu monanesai, right? But in the Williamo, you have Adieu Williamo, and then you have the whole of the crowd say, Semute nuka mute pulamo. And he is up there on the hill, and they approach, and the police coming down, and they are not stopping. And they get up on the hill with their big batons. In those days, they had their batons, and they're swinging the batons back and forth. They have their sensei. We're going to talk a little bit about sensei, and all their traditional band movie costumes. And they knock William off the horse, and he falls on the street, and he injures his back very badly. He has to be put on a ship and sent back to England, and he eventually dies in England. And so the song is all about William Layton trying to stop carnival. And it's a wonderful song because it incorporates so much history and resistance and stuff like that. Adieu, William, oh, se mute nuka mute pulamo. Mute nuka mute pulamo. Desan nuka desan pulavi. Adieu, William, oh, se mute nuka mute pulamo. Now, it's difficult for one person to sing that by themselves. So you see, you have to have the call and you have to have the response.
True.
And the drums, of course, are beating, giving it. So you have things like that, and then you have scandal. You have, for instance, a lot of the people that worked for the Guamilat people, the high society people in Roseau, the maids, the servants, as they used to call them, the helpers, they lived in Pottersville. And they would come across and they would sing all the scandal. They were living in working in the houses of the people. They knew who was loving, who was having child with who and whatever. And they're behind a mask because they had their mask face on. So you didn't know who they were. Yes. And they would sing all scandal. And their mistresses now were sitting in the verandas looking down. So they would know that they can sing these songs against these people and they were not being found out, you know. I'll give a little example. For instance, there was another police chief after Layton. His name was Branch. He was Colonel Branch. And every case that the police brought against somebody in front of the magistrate's name was Mr. Coulslatig. And he had the house that is still Coulslatig house up on this big step in King George V Street, the corner of King George and Great George. And they came down there and they're asking, I won't maybe use the language, but they were asking if Branch, that is the chief of police, say met mamau. So basically to tell the magistrate, Latig, tell Latig, basically, why is it that every time a police case is brought, the poor people, they are always proved guilty. So you, Latig, the magistrate, Branch must have something over you. So they come down the street, they're singing, "Eh Latigo, Lati, eh Latigo, Lati." Nukamadeo see Branch say, no. So he comes out on the step, that big step that's still there, and he says, Shate, nuke we alodias, deme sadye, nuke we alodias. So he's saying, yes, go ahead, sing. But tomorrow in court,
yes,
we will meet. We will meet. So it really, and remember, today we go a calypso, we have competition, who come first, who comes second, and all that. No. In that day, it was the song of the streets. Whatever you composed,
okay,
like for instance, sometimes they cleaned the songs up. So for instance, that song, another one that we use, traditional song, Jose Lampla Punu where you Jose, and Singing Stars took the song and they said, stay Singing Stars guitar pensa Jose. Oh no. Singing Stars just tidied it and made it polite.
Yes.
But the real words were, say, 5 mal papa dans your kai. These 5 women were all living together in this house. Say, 5 mal papa dans your kai. Jose Lampla Punu where you Jose. That's number 1, Jose. La so and so say number 2, Jose. That's number 3, Jose. Lampla Punu where you Jose. Your pan condi cham you, Jose. Your vieux chaudier say whatever it is, Jose. So that was the kind of thing that could never have passed a calypso competition regulation, right? But
wow.
it was the freedom of the streets. So I'm just recapping now. We had the music, I remember it's the drumming, and sometimes they were practicing, particularly in Lodbor. Well, they used to call Pottersville, but today we call Pottersville, but they called it Lodbor or Balahutong. And they would gather there in the nights before Carnival to compose these various songs. The other set was down in Newtown, Charlottesville, and they would gather there in Charlottesville and they would prepare their songs. And sometimes the big boys, the businessmen, and the politicians of the day from the 1920s would go and pay people to compose a song against an enemy of theirs. So you would have all of that taking part as well. But essentially, here you have the African rhythm, you have the call and response, and you have the musical instruments. So Lofty, I can continue. I'm moving on to costumes now.
Well, let us put a little check on the costume part, because you have a reason to be in here this afternoon. I can tell you the conversation on the live feed, it is already creating a buzz there. I can tell you lots of persons, they're loving your information, they're loving the contribution you're making this afternoon. Somebody by the name of George Charles said a while ago, when you were talking about Solomon in 1922, the person recognized we are now in 2022, and they say that, yes, we should celebrate the 100th anniversary of Solomon.
Yeah, because you see, it was a big case. The coroner, it never went to court, but the coroner, your coroner has to decide on what has happened in that death. They began blaming the man who he went to Point Michel with, and saying the man killed him and pushed him over the cliff. But then it was found that when they assessed the damage and all that, that really he just went over that cliff. The road is wide now, but in those days, it was between Point Michel and Loubier was very, very narrow. And so yes, it's 100 years, but it was a scandal. What these big men going to do? Are they going to look for a woman in Point Michel or what? In the middle of the week, and you're a big time married magistrate. And in those days, it was shock and horror and scandal, So naturally, it would go into the streets. Naturally, it would be carnival song, yeah, masquerade.
I know.
So fine. Well, I'm glad I got a response there from somebody, and you say there quite
many responses there. But let me just yield now to Maslin so that she can chime in on the conversation we're having. Maslin.
Yes, thank you, Lofty. Dr. Honychurch, you brought me back to the days of my mom. My mom used to love those songs, and we couldn't understand where those songs came from. But now you gave us the history of the origins of those songs, and it now makes sense, a lot of sense now. And it's interesting that, you know, those songs came from the beef of the day or the scandal of the day. But then presently, or, you know, in our, you know, genre of, you know, calypso or the music or what have you, we see it sometimes as the same continuation of things. But then we have heard persons, you know, winded up at the courts, and they inherited, you know, lawsuits. And, you know, I don't understand if this is part of our culture and it relates to what it used to be. It was built on the threshold of what it used to be. Why is it that, you know, well, the expression is just not free anymore, and people, there's so much checks, and, you know, people are so concerned about the lawsuits. It's like it's the freedom of the art is not really there. And I don't know what you have to say with reference to that on, you know, on that topic, but it is very interesting what you have just said.
Yeah, I would, thanks for that. I would say that what happens is the pattern has changed. So for instance, once in the 1950s, what happened is that in 1948, they set up the first committee to manage carnival. Now, carnival was never managed before. You know, is you all down in Newtown do your thing, you all in Pottersville, Lord Boy, you all do your thing. The streets are available, you all come and sing your song. There was no organization. And until the 1940s, there was no Queen show, there was nothing like that. It was the people's mass. So what happened is that from 1948, when they had the first committee and they were going to clean up carnival, they put notices in the paper saying, you know, any lurid behavior, any lurid songs, the police have the right now to come and apprehend you. And so that was a new thing that started. And then from the 50s, we started to copy Trinidad. We had the Calypsonian, we had the Carib Cinema, and the competitions would be held at the Carib Cinema. So here you have a person standing on a stage. Yes, they may have one or two backup singers, but the chanté mass finished and the calypso began. Calypso, you need you need script, you need composing, you need, for instance, the recording. And therefore, when Calypsonians go and do this, and it's all written down and it's all recorded, it's so different from a mass of people who have masks on their face. You don't know who is who. You don't know who has composed this song, because they've been drinking rum in Lordborough, Pottersville, and down in Newtown, Charlottesville, and they've been making that up over the last few days. And so there's no one person to be able to apprehend. So the only thing the police would do is, if you have a baton and you hit somebody and whatever, well, then you would, you know, go to court. But I would say that it's the change from the chanté mass to the written, recorded, judged calypso. So you have a road march now that is judged by prim and proper judges who decide what's good and what's not, and what don't have rhythm and doesn't have rhythm. And of course, the road march is judged usually by how often it is played, which gets more difficult as you get into the hi-fi music, because all through the 50s, 60s, you had people singing in the street, whether it was tennis shoe tongue, a brand new shoe, mommy say you shouldn't use, you just come in, your big foot you're putting. It was not on a hi-fi. But when the hi-fi started, now the man controlling the hi-fi is the one controlling the music. So, you know, things change, things adapt. And I think that is why we have this very kind of contentious situation now, because things are recorded and there are many, many more lawyers. I mean, I'm talking about the days in the 40s when maybe there was one or two lawyers in Dominica, and people wouldn't go, and people would say, are you going to take a song to court? What is that at all, you know? And it's only more recently that, you know, people have gone into the question of slander, Slander, of course, is when you insult somebody by speech. Libel is when you write it down on words. And it's the change in society, the social change. I think that is what I would use to answer your question as to why, the social change. And of course, we copy Trinidad, not only the songs, not only the whole business of Calypso, Calypso, call it what you want, but also the organized bands with costumes, which we had from the 1950s, the glory that was Greece, Egypt, the splendor of Africa, and everybody would dress up, and they would seamstresses who'd make all these outfits. And so now we moved on to bikini wear and, basketball pants for the boys and that kind of thing. So it changes, it's adaptable, it moves. And you find young people, they would not want to go in a costume band because it don't have the same vibes that it would have, like their bands with the feathers. Now we have feather bands, and it could be anywhere. It could be in Trinidad. If you took a picture, it's only the houses around that you'd say, oh, that's Rose. Oh, that's not Castries. That is not, St. John's Antigua. Because we just gone into the same costume that very often isn't even made in Dominica. It's imported. I have witnessed it myself, where on the night of Sunday night, the costumes haven't been flown in from Miami yet, no? And we have to have them for such and such a day. It's a different world. It's a completely changed thing. But talking about the costumes,
just before you get to the costume, I know you want to get to the costume, but the program that we do here, Mr. Honychurch, it is very engaging. And so we normally like to get, snapshots of where our listeners and viewers, what they're saying, comments, questions, suggestions to you. So just before you get to the costumes, as a matter of fact, someone listening and watching, Adelaide Paul is her name. She said, you, Dr. Lennox Honychurch, made her costume for her. So we'll get to the costumes in just a while, when she went up for some Queen show back then.
That's right. Yes, I have a picture of her. I don't have it with me, but I remember the costume in Portsmouth.
Yes. But we'll get to the costume segment in a while. Marilyn B. Isles is saying here on Facebook, good evening, I'm listening from London. My children and I, we are listening tonight, and we are finding this very, very interesting. That is the program that is, especially the Creole part. And her 11-year-old son wants to ask you, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much did you enjoy history when you were at school?
Well, I enjoyed it very well, because that was the one thing that I was best in, And one of the things, the luck I had is that I didn't depend entirely on school or a teacher. When I was growing up, my grandparents, my parents were informing me about things. So, I'll just quickly say that, for instance, in the case of my grandmother, when she was a member of parliament, there were no roads. She had to walk, she had to go on horseback, she had to sleep in police stations in Casa Bruce and Rosalie and Laplane. So when I was growing up now, and they were building the roads, she wanted to go and see the roads being built, and then she would explain to me how the road used to be before, and how they used to have Cross River with no bridge, and all of that kind of thing. So it was in my mind already before I went to secondary school that, these things happened before. There was these things, and you should discover and find out how they happened, and who were the people who were in charge of these things. So to tell this young boy, well, it was well before I actually went to high school, and it was my interest in places and people and things that spurred my interest. So when I got into the books now, and we had to do homework and we had to learn dates and all that, I was ready to move. I was ready to move into it. And it was because of what my parents and grandparents were informing me about.
All right, so yes, thank you very much. Let us just take another comment here. Bernard Allen, he's giving us a mouthful here. He's saying, good afternoon all. Lennox, thank you for your brilliant and riveting accounts, and for the passing on of our history in a very special way. that no one else can, also, although you give credit to a lot of persons before, but that is Bernard Allen's comment. He continues here by saying, your efforts and your preservation of our history is priceless. And for this, we must thank you as a nation. Thank you again. We can never thank you enough. We need you to come back to discuss artifacts. When can you, as I'm concerned about some of the things that have been destroyed in our island. So that is Mr. Bernard Allen comment here. Just stick a pin there, just take a note of it. You'll answer in a while. See if I could get another comment here from another viewer. This person is saying here, that is Gertrude Deja is listening. She's saying that she's loving the history lesson that you're providing us here this afternoon. Joseph Williams is saying, always good program on Civic Vibes. We also have Viva Mamu is listening, and Viva Mamu is saying that he or she, whoever Viva Mamu is, love the account that Lennox is giving. Our brother Pat Corbett in Portsmouth, he's saying thanks for that lovely carnival gift in terms of that discussion. So a lot of interesting comments thus far as we are moving on.
Great. Well, thank you. Always good to know, you know, what people are thinking and that it's reaching people and inspiring them. So that's a great part of it. Thanks for that.
Yes, indeed. A final comment here says, he should be recognized as a Black History, as Black History Month come to an end. Someone is saying you should be recognized.
Yeah, well, actually, I have been doing a lot of Black History talk for students. I did it was 2 weeks ago for the a certain group out of State College. And I was exhorting them. I explained about Black history, why it is February for the United States, October for the United Kingdom, because of course, Black people in those places are minority. They have been badly treated. Their history has been ignored. But for me, every month in the Caribbean and Dominica is Black History Month. I know that perhaps we should make a special effort. I also told them, you know, that we get a lot of information about famous inventors and people in the United States. But we should also be looking at the Dominica situation, finding out who are those people who really made, people like J. Ralph Casimir, who was an agent for Marcus Garvey in Dominica, all these letters that they wrote to Marcus Garvey to come down to Dominica to speak. You know, no, people don't talk about those things, you know. So there's a Black history element, but we must remember that really, if we are going to talk seriously about Dominica or in any of the other Caribbean islands, we must not forget when we're talking about Black history, not just to talk about those people who have distinguished themselves in the United States, but to look at the Black movement within our own territories, be it St. Lucia, Dominica, Antigua, wherever else. You know? So I've been doing my stuff for Black history. They call me a Bec Blanc, but my heart is, you know, because you have to admit, you see, you are in a society and you have to admit and understand the sources of that society. And in our case, the sources go way beyond the borders of Dominica and into Africa. And you've got to understand what was happening in West Africa before these people were brought here. And then what remained? They came with nothing. They came with nothing. And they recreated that whole heritage in Dominica from nothing. Agriculture, architecture, you know, all of these things. So that's a whole nother story. We were talking about carnival.
Yes,
but
indeed.
the carnival point is made.
Yes, and just to wrap up on that point that you just made there, someone by the name of Didi Easter is saying that it would appear our rich culture and heritage is being replaced by something far removed from what Dominica Carnival unique to its culture. Thanks to you, Dr. Honychurch, that person is saying, for keeping our rich cultural traditions documented for future generations.
Thank you very much. But then I must add, those guys down in Lale Grand Bay and those other people that do their sensei, which we're going to talk about, and the people that do their Lapu Kabwit, these are people who are keeping it alive. It's not just me talking. Those guys who are really down there dealing with the instruments, dealing with the costumes, they are also the people who are keeping it alive.
Yes, indeed. Yes, so we now give you the privilege now to go into the costume aspect of the discussion.
Okay, fine. So the thing is, we talked about music, we talked about the method of song, call and response coming from Africa. But you know, all you've got to do is to put in Google West African festivals and dances, and put images, and you will see so much that looks like what we have in Dominica, particularly in the Sensei. Sensei is a Twi language word for the fowl, the poule frisée, the fowl that has, you may remember it from childhood, there are very few of them around now, but their feathers were all like back to front. And in the Twi language, that was called sensei. Sensei, that was the kind of, it was a special kind of fowl, but it had a frisée kind of feathered covering. So the costumes that were built, the costume that were made by many people to run mass was called the sensei. And in the early days, you would take fibers of various kinds, and you would make these sensei costumes. You would have the cow horns, you'd cover your face, you'd make yourself taller than you really were by putting thick shoes, making thick shoes out of wood, and come down the road looking very fearsome. So, and then in places like Collyho, for instance, you would have groups, the Band Mauvais of Collyho, they have their particular type of outfit. But even so, if you take a picture of the Collyho Band Mauvais and you look through those West African pictures that you will find on Google, you will find here and there costumes that are very similar indeed, that have been just handed down the generations. Now, the other thing is that a lot of these masquerade bands and groups in West Africa, it went beyond masquerade. It was a kind of fraternity, it was a social grouping, and therefore they would help each other throughout the year. So you're all part of this group, and any problem you had, you would do a coup de main, you'd help drag a house, you'd help build a house, you'd help in the garden to clear land. You are part of this society, of this group. And then you came out in the festival times in your costume. And that also came down to Dominica, because you have a group, even let us take the Grand Bay guys, or even the Collyho fellas, but Grand Bay, you have a group that will come out every year together. They know each other, they know who's who, and they make the costumes together and they come out. So here's this pattern of a community group. And the sensei, as I said, is something that has been worn from the first days of arrival from Africa for any of these festivals and feasts, because they were part of the culture. Now, in 1963, we had a terrible incident where a fire let loose in King George V Street, and a number of young men, very prominent, very well-loved young men, were killed. And that has got the headlines. But if you go into the documentation, you will see that there were many other people earlier on, fires created by the sensei. One of the reasons being that to loosen the fiber, particularly the rope, they would go down by the bay, by the port, and they would get the fibrous rope, and they would use gasoline and kerosene to loosen the glue and to make it. And naturally, this was very, very flammable. Flammable. It could catch fire easily. And unfortunately, over the years, you had a number of these incidents. But it was the incident of 1963, Carnival 1963, that really shook everybody. And they passed legislation banning the sensei. So the African costume that had been worn for 200 and more years was banned. And it wasn't until 1993 that after 30 years, it was allowed, as it is now, but you had to have an ID hanging from the side of your costume, and your name would be registered with the cultural division, and the police would have a list so they would know who is in that costume. All of that is a result of the 1963 fire. So it was a very dangerous costume, and it could ignite. And of course, because everybody was in mask, that was a time when you couldn't, and this was the case, this was one of the issues in 1963. Who was the one that set the fire? Was it on purpose? And rumors spread, as they do in Dominica for any event of that nature. And so it was a tragic event, but it affected Carnival in the 20th century. And it was only in 1993 that it came back, and now it's an accepted part of Dominica Carnival. But masking of various kinds, it need not be a sensei costume, was common in West Africa, and it continued on in Dominica. And there was a type of mask that was like a mesh. It was a wire mesh, and you put thing like mosquito net behind the mesh, and you could see everything. When you were in the mask, you could see everything going on, but they could not see you, who you were. And so if you wrapped your head with cloth and outfitted yourself and covered your arms with gloves, and so you could basically have the freedom. And this is where the singing came in, because you could sing song about anybody and nobody would know you're the one. Or you could be an important person in society. You could disguise yourself, go out in the street and woolly with everybody else, drink your rum, lie down in the street in Lagon, and they wouldn't know that you were Mr. So-and-so because you were so heavily disguised. So that's where the masquerade come in. And then as it moved into Carnival, we get into the more the more imported type of costume. We had our big bands like Carnival Corner, Thunderbirds, and others that would make these spectacular bands based on the 10 Commandments or Ben-Hur or the movies that were current at the time, and the glory that was Greece, as I mentioned before, and or African themes, or in 1963, that people blamed the funeral of the Pharaoh. They blamed the fact that they were having this band as a funeral, and that was bad luck that created the fire, because people who were in that band dressed as the pharaohs for the funeral of the Pharaoh, they were some of those that were then burnt in the fire. So you had all of these type of bands, but that was different from the sort of unplanned traditional band mass, the band mass of the early 20th century going back into the 19th century. So we see the changes taking place in that, Yes. And then, of course, the other thing is when we deal with the songs, well, I talked about the early ones in the 20s, Solomon Ule and Ade William O. They can be used as tools to show historical points. So even if in the Calypso era, we get into the Calypsos of the 1950s, 60s, and particularly the 70s and 80s, you can quote sections of those Calypsos which tell you what was happening in Dominica at the time, depending on the politics that they were talking. Like during Miss Charles's time, you'd have songs about Mamo, and when people got disgruntled about that government, they would say, oh, is when you're in the kitchen, you're feeling the heat. And all of this kind of thing, the words would then relate to what was happening at the time. And if you go further afield in the wider, we used to use a lot of Caribbean calypsos in our local carnival. So, things that Sparrow would sing. Good morning, Mr. Walker. I come and check your daughter,
Come see your daughter.
Yes, you will put in the words for me, Marcelin. Anyway, and then there was a girl in Dominica, apparently, who always, when Sparrow would come here to sing at the Caribbean Cinema, she'd always be behind him. And he sang this song. Well, now, oh, you making wedding plans. And, all of these things. My Poussin, and, I could go on and on about these calypsos that were popular in Trinidad, but then they were so good that they would be used. And of course, the method, the music then affected the way that you performed in the street. When we had steel band, you had to help move the steel band down the street. So everybody was going down the street and moving the steel band. Now, okay, we have the speakers. But people don't participate in the song like they used to, because what happened is everybody would sing the laugh way, and everybody would join in. But now it's a different kind of music. We've gone into things like bouillon and so, and the whole pattern is extremely different. But those who are old enough to remember will remember the days when you'd have a line of people all holding each other along their shoulders, row after row after row, just coming down King George V Street. And they, Bada socket to me, look my water falling down. Bada socket to me, look my water start to waste. La 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 la. Now,
My water coming down. I feel it weaken my
everybody coming down. Now it's booyah, so you're just going boodum, 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 boodum in the same place. You don't even have to move. So it's different. Society changes, culture changes,
What a
so
treat, what a treat, what a treat you're giving us this afternoon. I must accept that, I must say that. As we're on the bands and the costume segment, Doctor, let me ask you, there's this band movie and the Black Devils. Can you give us the reasoning behind those bands and where they originated from?
Yes, it's a good thing you brought that up, because I was going to talk about that even earlier. Okay. There was, and I have a photograph actually from the 1870s, one of the first photographs of carnival in Dominica. And what they had were groups that they called darkies and red ochre. Now the darkies were those that would rub themselves with molasses. In those days, all the plantations were producing molasses. It was a side product of producing rum or sugar or whatever. And the molasses you would take and you'd rub on you, and then you would get powdered charcoal, and you would pat the charcoal all over you, and you would just wear like a towel around your waist, a loincloth, and you would have your horns on your head. And that was the darkies. And the red ochre now, there was a color that was used for mixing paint. It's ochre, and it's a kind of red orangey color. And they would cover themselves with it. And they would also have these long whips. Now, in those days, you had these cow whips because you had carts, ox carts, no trucks in those days. You could have an ox cart carrying load and all that. And these very long whips made out of, well, bull pistol, they used to call it. I won't explain how they made a bull pistol because we have children on this program. But they would stretch it. It would be very hard, and they would beat it on the street, or they would use leather and they would weave the leather together and of the cow hide. So those were other kinds of bands, the darkies, the red ochre, and the band that comes from Good Hope. The band that comes down from Good Hope, all covered in soot and all that, is one of the remaining examples of that kind of band, where they cover themselves in the black devil, as they call black devils, Because remember, you are talking about the 2 days before Lent, and you're basically saying, as it was over 200 years ago, that it was a period of looseness, of just total freedom. And you knew that come midnight, come Ash Wednesday morning, all of that had to end, all of that finish, So that was the origin of those darkies and red ochre. Because on the plantation, of course, you would have the molasses. So you could take the molasses and rub it all over you and put the ashes on top of it and get your darkie and so. But we have some old photographs. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And what about the reasoning behind the band movie now?
Well, the band movie was essentially, basically the costume, of course, I said, was usually the sensei, but other types of cloth costume were
Okay.
used. And the band mauvais was like, you know, mauvais as a mauvais is a bad band, for what you would call bad Johns. So we're going down the street, nobody go and try to stop us. We have control of the street, just as in the days of Ade William O. The police are trying to stop the band, and they're the band mauvais, and they're coming down the street and taking control. Yeah. So the band mauvais was basically the bad band. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's how you have it there.
Just before we get back, thanks, Dr. Honychurch, for such vital information this afternoon that is being dispensed here. I can tell you it is doing a whole lot of good for persons listening and watching based on the feedbacks that are coming through. Just before we get back to some of the comments, let me just yield to Maslin now so that she can chime in on the very interesting and informative program we're having this afternoon.
Thank you, Lofty. Thank you, Dr. Honychurch. You made me laugh. Those old-time songs, those old-time carnival songs, it's not songs that one can, you know, can just forget like that, because that is what we grew up in. That is who our parents were, and it's funny how so much of it has, you know, has just changed. But I am aware we are in a new era, and people evolve. But there are things in our history that remind us of where we came from as a people, things that we must preserve in its purest and authentic form, lest we lose our culture and we lose our history. And I want to ask, what can you recommend for the preservation of our culture, of songs, our costumes, not only the carnival costume, but the warp duet as well, because we see that too is changing. And of course, the warp duet is our national dress, and our historical landmarks is, you know, are included in, you know, all of what is changing as it relates to that of our history that gives us our country its own unique signature and identity. And Dr. Honychurch, I would like you to, you know, to share some light on that. Give us, if you can, you know, give us some answers to that when Lofty returns with, you know, with his with the comments, after the comments on the Facebook.
No, he can go ahead.
Thank you, Lofty.
Doc, you can go ahead. You can go ahead and respond to
Okay, right. Yeah, and the songs perhaps are one of the most difficult, because we have to be able to get them recorded before the people pass on. I mean, the song I told you about with the helpers, the servants, domestics, for instance, Mass Face coming from Pottersville and singing in the streets about all the deba and confusion and mépris on their mistresses. I heard that about 3 years ago. And the person who sang that song is still there, but we have to record it and give the background to it. And we have people like Pearl Christian has done an amazing job with her Cicero singers, because they have been using that material from the past as much as they can, wherever they can find these songs, to be able to preserve it recorded, you know. So it's important that people do this. I'm always talking about what I call oral history, that people should be going to these elderly people, particularly those who have been involved in that creativity, and take notes before they pass away. Because a lot of these things are in the minds of people. They're not sitting in a document in the archives or anything. They're in the minds of people, and those people are going to go. So just what you were saying, Maslin, that it's important for them to be recorded and noted down, and wherever possible, I try to take a note. But you see, I'm not a musician, and it's the musicians now that are cultural musicians that have to record these things and make sure. So it's a matter of recording, it's a matter of interviewing, it's a matter of taking notes, you know, and it's very, very difficult indeed.
Yes, thanks, Doc.
But
Thanks.
yeah.
Yes. Before we bring the conversation to a wrap this afternoon, for sure, we want to kind of contrast what was happening then to what we're seeing now. And Civic Vibes program, we always end with a sort of call to action. What can we do as a people? What can Civic Vibes be involved in to help promote or help push the exact programs that we're talking about? But we'll get to that in just a bit. You spoke something earlier, you said something earlier that kind of struck my attention, and I just want to go back to just a little bit. The papier liberté, you call it?
That's right.
What was the duration of that papier liberté for the people back then? Just go a little deeper in that aspect.
Yeah, well, if it was for carnival, you would have it for the weekend and the days.
Okay.
You know, and therefore, if you were parading in the streets, I had somewhere the document, a copy of how it was issued, but it basically said that you are entitled, this person is entitled to be out and about and singing and playing music. And that was a papier liberté, they called it in the Creole. And it would last usually for the carnival period, because basically that was the time when people were allowed out or allowed to visit other plantations. And remember the elite, the high up master and sergeant l'habitation and everything, they would be having their own parties, you know, in their estates. And the slaves would be looking on, and a lot of these things passed on in that way. The whole business of why it was 2 days before Ash Wednesday that it happened, or in the English islands, the days between Christmas and New Year's. So that was when the papier liberté came out. You had the freedom to go. The person has the freedom to move around on those days. That was it. And once emancipation came, you didn't need papier liberté again.
Yes, yes, that's quite understandable. Someone is asking a very important question here. Hi, Lennox. The person is saying first, hi, Lennox. Thank you for a great contribution to our history. And the question from that person is there any part throughout the periods addressed that included the indigenous people of our island?
Oh, yes. Well, I did mention briefly that they had their own pattern that they have now taken over in a way, the Wednesday. They have now taken over for Tewe Vaval, because they, you know, took a lot of these things and then they internalized them and they made them part of their own culture. So we have now on the Ash Wednesday, particularly in the evening, afternoon, up in the Kalinago territory, mainly it climaxes in the area of Bataka, in the Bataka community, where they tewe Vaval. The Vaval is in the coffin and they throw him on the fire and he burns, and that's the end of carnival. So that's very much a Kalinago thing. So I did mention earlier that they had their own way, their own music, their own pattern of celebrating this. But you see, the thing is, remember, it's only within the 1970s that motorable road went through the territory. So they were doing all their thing going back hundreds of years, but it wasn't being recognized necessarily by the Roseau people or the people of society and so. But when people were able to go in the territory and observe and participate, and now people, I don't know what will happen under the COVID regulations, but without it, people would actually go to the territory to participate in this. There was another place where this used to happen more, and that's in Dublin. Dublin used to have Tewe Vaval as well. And maybe in a little way they still do recently, but is more identified with the Kalinago territory. Good.
Yes. All right, Doc. I know we have been at it for like an hour plus. Let us just take a little break now. We're going to take something from JD, a much more contemporary in song. And then when we get back after the break, we'll ask you to just kind of wrap up everything for us into our wrapping up.
That's okay, because I see we've gone well past 5 o'clock.
Yes.
All right.
Let's just take a little break. We'll be back to bring it to a wrap in just a while, because I know you're a very busy man.
Coming on the road to be morning, man, you won't believe what I seen. A Calypsonian dressed like a fourchette, trying his best to enter a cabinet. And I thought this would be the highlight of the town, but as I move around, see so much going on. See the high, the drunk, the happy and gay, girls in shorts, panty tights, even soon play way. All class and creed come to break away. So what you see don't say is carnival day. We out on the road, mama, time to unload. We out on the road, no place on earth can do it like we. Only mask make we forget we own misery. Oh gosh, look at that, we playing in class. Somewhere in a corner is Al Jazeera, streaming live everything that pass. Mama, 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 oh mama, 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 that is mass. Oh mama.
Well, that number indeed from JD, that is mass. He entitled this one,
Yes.
Mama, that is mass. Any thoughts on that one from JD, Doc?
Yeah, because it raises a very important situation comment. One of the great things about the Chante Mass from before, and then moving into the first Dominica calypsos, was the whole question of masking. And this is a very clever thing where you can sing an entire calypso. And it, on the surface, it may not appear to be what it is about, but everybody who is in the band knows what it's about. So sometimes calypsonians will actually go and be too close. They will name names. They will make it too apparent. But let us take, for instance, the first major 60s calypso. Tokyo, brand new shoe. A brand new shoe, mommy say you shouldn't use. You just come in, your big foot you put in, and see how you mash up the lace of my brand new tennis shoe tongue. Well, when I was a child singing that, I didn't know anything about what it meant. It was just a good song. And you see, it was masked. It was masked. The whole story, which I'm not going to go into now because adults will know what I'm talking about. You had it masked, and therefore it was kind of extremely popular. It had a good rhythm. It had a good punchline at the end. And you mash up the lace of my brand new tennis shoe tongue. And that's a skill of calypso, is to talk about something. You're not mentioning exactly what it is, but everybody who is singing it knows. I mean, look at the little one we have now. I mean, I'm just picking one of them about cocoa stick. Yeah, I'm selling my cocoa stick.
Cocoa sticks.
Everybody knows sticks. Yeah. Everybody knows what she's singing about, but she has not said anything that could enter a court of law and be accused of slander or whatever, because or even the term that is used if you are disreputable and you're using improper language. You're not using no improper language. Everybody has got it. It's a catchy tune. And that method of masking is one of the great skills of calypso creation, you know? And we should think of that as well as part of the story of carnival. True. How well can you mask?
So based on the discussions, Doc, it would be fair to say that from what you told us happened back then in terms of our celebrations to what we're witnessing now, there's a stark contrast in terms of even the celebrations itself, right?
Yeah, because it has changed. Of course, we always have this big debate about whether we're going to move carnival to another time. But the problem is that so many people have moved Carnival, St. Vincent, St. Lucia, Antigua, Barbados. They've moved it all to the summer. They've moved it to the time when they think they're going to be the most visitors. And therefore the space for having one of these festivals and moving it to another date is less and less. And as Dominica has been marketing it, there's the real mass. This is the real thing. Our sensei, our stuff is very much promoted. So I mean, I'm open to anything, but basically I'm saying that if we're going to maintain a roots mass, we have got to think of what Carnival is for us. What Carnival is for Dominicans. We're not dancing Carnival for tourists. It's for Dominicans. It's for diaspora people who want to come home and experience friendship and gathering and the real thing. So I would focus on seeing this is the authentic real mass Carnival. We're keeping it in various ways. We have our costumes still, and we have our calypso, or we have our lapu. We've kept elements of it, and we're not selling out because it's part of some productivity for tourism or for others, and we are merely the performers for the benefit of others. So I would just like to say that in closing, that Carnival and the roots of Carnival must be understood, appreciated, and we must realize how rich it is that we still have it, and how fortunate it is that we still have it, and that we can have our bikini. I'm not preventing you for your bikini and your feathers and your jewelry. That's fine, but also have this other part that
Yes.
speaks of our roots, the authentic. Thank you very much.
All right, Doc,
Thank
just
you.
before you go, let me just ask Marceline to just chime in at least one more time, and then we'll ask you the all-important question now to wrap it up in terms of the action part as to how we can use what you spoke of, our history, where our celebrations, carnivals, and the like is concerned, how we can use that to impact our lives in a more meaningful way. So that is the wrap-up question, but Marceline, I yield to you now for your sort of bringing it together in terms of your contribution. Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Lofty, and thank you, Dr. Honychurch. Back in the earlier in the conversation, when you spoke about the way the people were resilient, the way the people were determined, I observed in that conversation, nothing could stop the people. The people wanted to their carnival, they wanted to play their mass, and even when with the presence of the police, they would stand up to the police and they would have the carnival. But now we live in a time where we yearn to see that same level of resilience in our people. I think our people have moved away from that type of resilience. I don't know if it's a good thing, and I don't know if it is a bad thing. And because of the nature of the program we are having, it's about our carnival, and I'm hoping at some point you will see it fit to, or if we were to invite you to another program where we can talk about the deeper things, where I know that you have researched, you have put your knowledge and your writing and your research in the deeper things, like the demarcation of our landmarks, because our history and our carnival and our culture, they all relate. And I wanted to ask about the Jean Rees house. And it's one of your research, one of your documents I read, where I found out about Jean Rees, because I did not know anything in reference to that lady being born in Dominica and grew up her early part of her life in Dominica. And today we see that property removed or demolished. I kind of want to ask, how do you feel about that? And is there anything in our constitution to protect our national our national landmarks and more or less our historical buildings. I want to police everything like we are talking about the whole, as it relates to our carnival, our culture, and, and our history. And that's the reason I'm asking that question this afternoon, because I see it as a non-political question, but one of history.
Yeah, the thing is that we have no legislation, either for archaeology, that is what is dug down in the ground. We have no legislation. We tried, back in the early 90s, we tried to create some form of legislation for historic buildings, but it never was actually enacted and stuff. So the problem is that a person owns a property and basically it's left to their conscience as to what they do with that property. It's theirs, and the property rights and so basically cannot be controlled under our constitution at present because the legislation does not exist. The thing is, of course, I'm just using quickly the point of Jean Rhys, because that could be a whole program by itself. This is the most famous Dominican author. She's descended from the Lockhart family, and there are many Lockharts still in Dominica, and other families that are related to it, like the Williamses and so. But we don't recognize that here. I mean, in May, another biography of her is going to come out in England. And it is called, the name of the book is I Used to Live Here Once. And the whole theme of the book, because I assisted the author, is going to be about the impact that Dominica had on the life of this woman. It's going to be known all over the world. I have had to take around people from Japan, who have come here from parts of Europe, Czechoslovakia, and all these places, who have come to Dominica just because of Jean Rhys. So if we link that to our heritage, the importance of recording it, I'm not talking about recording it on a tape recorder or any other kind of technology. It's a matter of noting it, writing down, repeating it. It's very, very important indeed. And people have said, oh, Lennox, who follows you? Who comes after you? Well, the problem is that I have been trying to encourage people, but then of course you can understand people say, well, where's the salary at month end? Where's the position? Now, years ago, archives or the cultural division should have created a post that a young person could go in and they know they can get a salary at month end, But there are many people. We have just lost, for instance, Earl Etienne, the artist. His visuals of painting have recorded Carnival in all its forms, whether it is Sensei, whether it's Duet, whether it's Jeep. His paintings have recorded it. We have Alwyn Bully. Alwyn Bully has basically dedicated his life to all of that. And unfortunately, it's not possible for him now to participate as deeply as he used to. So we have to encourage people to really realize the value. And I just want to end on one thing in relation to Carnival. It is an important release for the people. People are under stress. They're under economic stress. For whatever political party they believe in, they are under political stress because they feel that, it's either that they're unfair or that whatever they are involved in is difficult and full of tension. And the one thing that those 2 days of Carnival provide is, as it was in the days of the enslaved people getting their papier liberté, it was a time of liberation. It was a time of describing, like Solomon Wule, Sinu Mona Mona Ne Sala,
Yes.
This is a relief. It's a psychological relief. There are psychologists in the past who talked about the conscience collectif, the collective consciousness, and the people require moments of festivity, of enjoyment, of relief for the society to relate to one another. You meet friends, you wave, you interact, and you realize that, okay, we have our differences, but this time we're going to enjoy ourselves. If we're singing our calypso, we don't make our calypso so pointed that we have to end up in court or something like that. We send a message as has been said for generations, but we also do it as one. And that's the importance of Carnival to me, to release that tension, release that pressure, and do it as all Dominicans together, regardless of all your differences, and you're quite entitled to your different political points of view and your different perceptions of the world. But here's a time we basically enjoy each other. Not only enjoy ourselves, but we enjoy each other's company, you know, make a joke. Because tomorrow is Ash Wednesday and life will be serious, you know.
Dr. Can
Doc, I want to thank you, Doc. That is where we must bring the program to a wrap.
I know, I
just
realize.
I know we have long expired the time that you said that you'll be here with us. So the final call to answer, the final call to action question that is to you. Having said all that to the Doc, how can we use that information and more that you have given us here this afternoon? Quite a mouthful indeed. How can we use that now in such a way to bring some kind of meaningful impact into our daily lives, our community life, or life at national level? How can we use that rich history to kind of
well, basically,
it's impactful life that we need right about now? How can we do that?
Basically, it's celebrating our identity, understanding the people in the past who have contributed, recognizing the people who, I mean, look at this. I am not a musician, but I sit in awe of these many musicians who keep the music going. I mean, I'm talking about Swinging Stars, yes, but you have all the others for Serenade and Triple K and everybody else who have been making major contributions. So I would simply say that the knowledge of the past, the heritage, should make us stronger and more determined to deal with the challenges of the world, and they're getting worse and worse. But if we feel, here we are as Dominicans with these beautiful island of fresh water, but also the resilient culture, it gives us a strength to deal with the issues at play. The increased cost of living, the extreme expenses of everything, and a greater determination to contribute and to do what we can do in every possible way, whether it's agriculture, whether it's art, heritage, fishing, small scale agricultural productivity, any of these things. And Carnival and all the messages of Carnival should strengthen us for that.
True.
So thank you very much.
Yes, Doc, on behalf of the Civic Vibes team, Marceline, myself, and the engine room workers, the team that is, we want to thank you profusely for taking time off your Sunday and coming to speak to us, but not only to us, to our many fans and followers across the globe at this time, those in the region, and also even more importantly, those of us on this blessed rock called Dominica. So once again, thank you very much. Hope to see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, and lovely being with you, Marceline.
Yes,
is it Marceline? Marceline or Marceline?
Marceline, but I want to take back your memory, Dr. Honychurch. You remember when you taught at St. Andrew's High School?
Yes.
And you had this little white fan.
Yes, fan.
I was the little girl that my finger got trapped in the vehicle, and then you gave us a ride from school.
Hey, last month, I hope your finger is all right.
Yes. Yes. When I closed the door, my hand got closed in the vehicle at the door.
Yes.
And I just, I never forgot you.
I remember that, and I said, what have I done to this little girl? I hope it isn't a major accident. Oh my goodness.
My four fingers was winded up in the door.
Well, thanks,
I got to remind you of that. But thank you so much, Dr. Honychurch, for all the times you picked us up on the road from Concord to St. Andrews. This was, I just could not forget that, Dr. Honychurch. So I saved that one for you for the final.
Okay, thank you.
All right,
Yes,
Dr. Honychurch, we want to thank you. Thank you for coming on here, and hope to see you back here on this platform very, very soon with another topic, interest. Thank you.
Yes.
Right.
All the best, Doc. All the best.
Yes, thanks.
Good.
All right, folks, that is it. Dr. Honychurch is making his exit now from the platform here this afternoon. I can tell you, based on the information, based on the comments, the suggestions that you guys generated here this afternoon, I know that you guys enjoyed that treat very, very much. Before me and Marcin bring it to a wrap in like, what is the time now? 20 minutes time, it's 20 to 6. We're just going to play that song of JT one more time. And we're going to bring it to a wrap in just a bit of our closing comments here. To all our Civic Vibes team, to all our Civic Vibes followers, our fans, we love you very much, guys. And thank you each and every Sunday for taking time off your Sunday to be part and parcel with what is happening here. Okay, we'll be back in just a bit.
Yes.
All class and creed come to break away. So what you see, don't say it's carnival day. We out on the road, mama, time to unload. We out on the road, no place on earth can do it like we. Only mass make we forget we own misery. Oh gosh, look at that, we playing in class. Somewhere in a corner is Al Jazeera, streaming live everything that pass. Mama, 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 oh, mama, 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 that is mass. Oh, mama. What? Ha! Oh, mama. Don't try making sense of anything. Forget all your bitterness and grudges. Mortal enemies become best of friends. When it's betting time, man is no problem. Alexander on the ground, big bottom in the ear. You not high, it's Kalai, jamming hard from the rear. Rice man pass with a glass and a cardboard cutlass. You see Kalai in the band, so he looking for Matt. Daru wants to party with Luke. No guns come out today. His mass in the air. We out on the road, mama, time to unload. We out on the road, no place on earth can do it like we. Only mass make we bury animosity. Oh gosh, look at that, we playing in class. Imagine mass come, link up with Saddam, and no man come back and blow the brass. Mama, 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 oh, mama, 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 that is mass. Oh, yo, yo, mama, 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 mama. Ha. Everybody come out in their glory. Jubilation, who not there are sorry. Judas sitting high, smiling all alone. 30 silver coins on a golden throne. Roosevelt in amnesia, but the girls staying far. They afraid Melissa, but they scared of Sniper. Happy sign in his hand, saying bring back the pan. I see Terry Baron, photobombing Linton. Joshua Biafit, Independence Street, in a Lapoca way. Look mass in the air. We out on the road, mama, time to unload. We out on the road, no place on earth can do it like we. Only mass make we bury, we integrity. Oh gosh, look at that, we playing in class. Imagine Isa backing up better, singing scary guitar.
My brother JD, thank you for that number indeed. That is a mass. Dominicans, you have just been watching your ways that you could contribute to the program of Civic Vibes. You know, that is hard work. Each and every Sunday we come here, we prepare. Also, there's some activities that we do on the ground. So the page was up during the intermission, as it were, so that you could contribute financially to the workings and doing of the Civic Vibes program right here in Dominica. We don't just talk, people. We do the work. We put in the hard work as well. And your help is needed. Your help is also welcome each and every time. Let me just, before I move back to Marceline for closing comments, we have like another 12 minutes to go. Let me just touch on some of you in terms of your names and let me say some of your comments, because the number of comments that have been generated here this afternoon, will not have time to go through all of the comments, but we'll try to take as many as possible here. Juanita Prince is writing, where is Earl for that song? LOL, as to the connection that has to be made there, Juanita, you'll have to call me and tell me what connection you're trying to make if that song here. Marianne Prowl is watching. Phoebe Jones is watching as well. Cecilia Bedminster, always watching what is happening here on Civic Vibes. Thank you very much. Joe Benjamin, you are there. Bernard Aline, we touched you earlier. Thanks, Lofty and Marceline. Joe Benjamin is writing that here. Thank you very much as well, Joe. Felita Paul Thomas is saying, good day, Lofty, interesting program. You look well. You are putting on weight. You find that, Felita? I don't think so. But if you say that, I will accept it, okay? Judith Cochran, my fellow constituent in Cochrane. Good afternoon to you, Judith Cochran from Cochrane. Sandra Sylvester says, good job. Thank you very much, Sandra. Annie Edwards is also watching as well. Annie Edwards, good afternoon to you, your husband and your family as well. Good afternoon to you guys up in the Wesley area. Carol Bruni is watching as well. Carol, good afternoon, and thank you very much for your contribution. Jennifer Dow is watching. Adelaide Paul, we touched on you earlier. Adelaide Paul is writing here, very enlightening. Thank you. I guess you are thanking Dr. Lennox Honychurch. Adelaide, thank you for your comment. Let me see if I could go through some comments here. Dorian Dorival is listening as well. He says here, again, it was a great and wonderful program. Thank you for that endorsement, Mr. Dorival. Aldi John is writing here. Thank you, sir. Thank you as well, Aldi. Norma Ito, that lady is locked in. She's always locked in with us right here. Vernie Vash, is that? Vernie Vash says, thank you, Dr. Honychurch. Indeed, I learned a lot this afternoon. You bring a lot of good points out in our history. Eldika John from Salisbury, good afternoon to you. Gwyneth James. Jackie DeQuental is saying thank you very much. Thank you as well. Angela James, Juanita Prince, Sandra Sylvester, I touched you earlier. Clara Lynn Warrington is watching. Good afternoon. Merlin Shillingford, you're there with us. Brother David C. Joseph, good afternoon to you as well. Gina Castle, Pat Corbett, we touched you as well. Good afternoon to you folks down there in the north. Didi Easter, we touched you already. Marilyn Isles, we touched you already. Good afternoon to you guys. Thanks, Marilyn, for having your children listen with you tonight to the program all the way in the UK at this time. Gaff Richards is looking, and Gaff's wrote here, great program. I enjoyed every bit of the program this afternoon. God bless. Josephine Williams is listening, and a number of other persons. Marvella Defoe is right. Well, Marvella, I can tell you missed out a lot. If you're just rich, you miss out a lot, but that program is recorded, and so you can go on your podcast, or it's on YouTube as well, or you can just go back to Civic Vibes Facebook page and have a look on the program that you just missed out on, Marvella Defoe. Christine Nicholas is saying, I love the program. The season is here. Thanks, Lofty and host. All right, folks, that is all the comments I can touch on for now in the interest of time. We have 10 minutes to kind of bring the program to a wrap here. So let me move back to Marceline Edwards. Marceline, by the way, I'm seeing you rocking a yellow and a blue. Can you give me some kind of enlightenment as to why, Marceline?
Okay, Lofty. Well, today I wear the colors of the Ukrainian flag, blue and yellow.
Okay. I
Because,
I thought as much.
yes, Lofty, because we are one global community. And we will get affected by Putin's war in Ukraine. So I stand in solidarity with the Ukrainian people, whom by the virtue of their strength, their resilience and inspiration are fighting for the soul of their democracy and their country. And what I will say is that, Lofty, this is a clear indication that when a people are organized and inspired, they can resist the strongest of powers there be. And that is your quote, Lofty. You like to talk about the powers there be. Well, I am using it this afternoon, so I'm borrowing it from you this afternoon.
Once you're willing to pay, that's all.
But, you know, it is, we are still in the time of year, and when we celebrate our, you know, rivalry of colors and the culture of our music, our art, our dance, and, you know, and our history. And that comes with the emancipation of slavery. And I was reading somewhere where at Carnival, and back in the days in the colonial era, when during Carnival, the slave masters and the slaves, they would you know, they would enjoy Carnival together. They would dance together. And sometimes they would have gotten so drunken that they would exchange clothing with each other. So that tells us that we have to come together. This is a time when we come together as a people, when we come together to celebrate our carnival. I know it is somewhat, you know, an unusual carnival, because most of Dominicans are going to celebrate this carnival, how you call it, virtually, because of COVID-19. But no matter how it is celebrated, it ties in wonderfully with our history and with our emancipation, and also with Black History Month that is quickly exiting, because we know that we are officially celebrating Black History Month as well. So yes, on that note, I ask that we all come together, not only just in the carnival spirit, but come together with one inspiration. Come together where we can unite, because I think we are getting to where we see the Ukrainian people are, where they have to fight the powers there be. And they are only fighting it because they have the will to fight, the courage to fight. And as we celebrate our carnival, it's not just about we celebrating carnival, because Dr. Lennox Honychurch broke it down quite nicely as to how our carnival came about, as to the resilience of our parents, our foreparents back then, as to how and when they wanted, they would get their way to celebrate the carnival, because this is a form of emancipation. This is celebrating their freedom, and no one was going to stop them from celebrating their freedom. So I think that we have to take a page from the past and apply it in our today, so that we can be a resilient people and free again, free from the shackles of slavery, because those shackles seems to be coming back on real quickly. So I leave with us a united spirit, and I hope we can be inspired by the people of Ukraine. I thank everyone here this afternoon who logged in on the live. It was a great program, but it could not be great without each and every one of us, particularly you, the audience, logging in this afternoon. So thank you, Loftus. And thank you for the engine, the people behind the engine of Civic Vibes, who make Civic Vibes happen, because we have the persons who are behind the scenes helping with the flyer, with the et cetera, et cetera. I would call them the technicians. So thank you very much. And Lofty, a very happy carnival to you, and all Dominicans, enjoy your carnival. I will enjoy mine virtually. May God bless us as a people. Thanks.
All right, thank you very much, Marceline Edwards. Your contribution this afternoon is truly and greatly appreciated. We also, as well, I also want to thank Dr. Lennox Honychurch for his great and passionate contribution here about Dominica's culture, Dominica's history, Dominica's carnival. He took us way back when and brought us up to present time. So we want to thank him very much and ask that the good Lord continue to protect at least his memory and his health, so that he can continue to do good work for and on behalf of all people in Dominica. Folks, just before we end the program here this afternoon, just like Marceline, I too want to empathize and sympathize with the people of Ukraine at this time. I know it's a very trying time. I know it's a very touching time for them. We pray that God give them what it takes in terms of their strength and their zeal to undergo that level of brutality that is being unleashed on them as a nation at this time. But with effective leadership, I know they can do it and they will be victorious at the end. One of the quotes that I listened to and I really had the opportunity to digest from the president of Ukraine, that is Mr. Zelensky. He basically said to the American president and the Western world, when basically they were telling him or asking him or requesting of him that they could evacuate him, you know, as the president, he said, no way, I'm not going to leave my people at the back. I'm prepared to fight. I'm prepared to fight it out with my people. A matter of fact, he even put on his ammo, his ammunition gear.
Military
gear. And if his ammunition in his hand, and he said, yes, I am prepared to fight it out with my people. So that is effective leadership. He told the Western powers and America in particular, I don't want a ride. I don't want to be evacuated. What we need is arms to liberate our people from the tyranny of Brother Putin. Folks, we are living in an era where I am saying this afternoon, this is the end, or this is the beginning of the end, rather, of Mr. Vladimir Putin. There's no coming back. It will take a little time, but that is the end of Putin's era on the world stage. He has certainly crossed the mark. He's what, 69 years old? I think he has made his time. And so he went out in that fashion. That is the fashion he chose. But mark my words, people, that level of brutality unleashed on Ukraine as a sovereign people, that will not go unpunished. And Putin basically made his bed and he has prepared to lie and sleep in his bed. That is the end of Putin. It's just a matter of time. Then people, it's what, 2 minutes to 6. We have to go in just a while. But Marceline, let me just give you at least 1 minute out of that 2 minutes to promote the program on Tuesday coming up. Next Tuesday. Will you be having a program?
Well, if there's an audience, of course, we will have the program. And the name or the title of the program is The People's Voice on the CBI. It's a brand new program, and we are discussing the CBI and how it benefits Dominica and Dominicans, if it is benefiting Dominica and Dominicans. And that is where we go on the People's Voice on the CBI Facebook platform every Tuesday from 6:30 p.m. in the afternoon, 5:30 p.m. our time here, and 6:30 p.m. Dominican time. So this Tuesday, we will be having a sister from, well, she lives in Dominica presently. So she will be on the program with us. And I ask every one of you to join the program and please make your contributions. And I have shared the link with quite a number of persons who have responded. It is the People's Voice on the CBI. So you will find us there. Our sister who is going to be with us on Tuesday, her name is Catherine Fingal. She is one of the spicy chicks on Facebook. And I think she will have a very good contribution to make to the program. So please log in. Don't forget, it's 5:30 p.m. US time and 6:30 p.m. Dominican time. So
All right.
that's it.
Thank you very much, Marceline. We start on time, we end on time, folks. We want to say thank you very much for your participation, for you staying on with us each and every Sunday from the 4 o'clock hour to the 6 o'clock hour. Big things are in store for Civic Vibes, or bigger things, I should say, is in store for Civic Vibes. We'll be breaking some news to you very, very soon. All right. So folks, enjoy whatever is left of your Sunday. We at Civic Vibes, we love you very much. Thank you for viewing.
Thank you.
We're gonna go out on this number from the web.
Thank you.
All right.
Bed, nightmares in my head. Whoa, yo, yo, Papa Boje, Papa Boje. Man hunting me down, cause I win the crown. Whoa, yo, yo, Papa Boje, Papa Boje. I get up in cold sweat. Never feel fright so yet. In my dreams, I could see fellas chasing me, mated by folks who plan their life around the success of one Calypsonian. Why? I dream I win crown, I end up 6 feet down. Give them their monarchy for this mega bus. I saw me in leaders. Give them their monarchy. Let we all shout once again. Let's who is King Reign. Just reign, just reign. I don't want to be an unsolved mystery. Give this cup from me because of the monarchy. I saw hearts of stone. Whoa, yo, yo, Papa Boje, Papa Boje. At home not their own, but they live for the throne. Whoa, yo, yo, Papa Boje, Papa Boje. They put me in cemetery. Nothing I could do, no hope for rescue. Subjects of the royal family, facing the end of a dynasty. Why? I dream I bring crown, I end up 6 feet down. Give them their monarchy. I get thrown in the ghetto, enemies on where I go. Let we all shout once again. Let's who is King Reign. Just reign, just reign. I don't want to be an unsolved mystery. Give this cup from me because of the monarchy. yeah. Whoa, Papa Bonje, Papa Bonje. I kept dreaming of success. It sent me in the rest. Can't risk this reality. Keep this cup from me. What shall it profit me? It's life and liberty over money and Kaiser monarchy. Boy, boy, boy. I dream I win crown. I end up 6 feet down. Give them their monarchy. The nightmare felt real. Look, I'm trembling still. Give them their monarchy. Then we all shout once again. Let's who is king reign. Just reign. Just reign. I don't want to be an unsolved.
Cocoa sticks. Cocoa sticks. Mystery. It's getting harder. It's getting harder. I have to try something to earn a living. I must dress sexy for my customers to see. When they see the product, they will support me. I try selling big, that not selling. Dashing and Christophine, that not selling. But when I started selling my cocoa stick, people talking, something happened. People talking, something happening. Cocoa for sale, cocoa for sale, cocoa for sale. Who buying it? Who buying it? Cocoa for sale, cocoa for sale, cocoa for sale. Who buying it? Who buying it? If you want white cocoa, I selling it. If you want dry cocoa, you can get it. Any kind of cocoa, I selling it. Hot or cold cocoa, you can get it. Cocoa for sale, cocoa for sale, cocoa for sale. Who buying it? Who buying it? Cocoa for sale, cocoa for sale, cocoa for sale. Who buying it? Who buying it? Cocoa sticks. Cocoa sticks. Things really bad. Things really bad. Who in the kitchen that feeling the heat? I might be smiling, but I know what I'm feeling. I have to try something to earn a living. I tried selling pepper, but pepper burning. Big sand aqua that not selling. But when I advertise my cocoa sticks, everybody buying my cocoa selling. Money I making, my cocoa selling. Cocoa for sale, cocoa for sale, cocoa for sale. Who buying it? Who buying it? Cocoa for sale, cocoa for sale, cocoa for sale. Who buying it? Who buying it? If you want white cocoa, I selling it. If you want dry cocoa, you can get it. Any kind of cocoa, I selling it. Hot or cold cocoa, you can get it. Cocoa for sale, cocoa for sale, cocoa for sale. Who buying it? Who buying it? Cocoa for sale, cocoa for sale, cocoa for sale. Who buying it? Who buying it? Cocoa sticks. Cocoa sticks. Things picking up. Things picking up. My cocoa production, I must export solutions like cocoa, tea and dumpling. My friends in Brooklyn like it with sardine. I went to World Bank for assistance. But when I show them my cocoa stick size, people buying, my cocoa selling, my sales rising, my cocoa selling, cocoa for sale, cocoa for sale, cocoa for sale. Who buying it? Who buying it? Cocoa for sale, cocoa for sale, cocoa for sale. Who buying it? Who buying it? If you want white cocoa, I selling it. If you want dry cocoa, you can get it. Any kind of cocoa, I selling it. Hot or cold cocoa, you can get it. Cocoa for sale, cocoa for sale, cocoa for sale. Who buying it? Who buying it? Cocoa for sale, cocoa for sale, cocoa for sale. Who buying it? Who buying it? Cocoa sticks. Cocoa sticks.